Hey guys, welcome back to Wrestling News 365. Hope everyone is doing very well. As always, there is a ton of news stories to get into today. So we're going to talk about some Impact Wrestling, but you might see behind me, you might say, Owen, we're talking about Impact Wrestling, but you've got AEW up on the screen. You've got AEW Dark on the screen. Why are you talking about AEW when you said you're going to be talking about Impact? There's Impact Wrestling in the title. Well, we are going to get to Impact Wrestling news, but this kind of does reference a former Impact Wrestling star. You can see him right there. A former Impact Wrestling X Division champion has made his AEW debut at the recent AEW Dark television tapings, that being former Impact star ROHIT RAJU, also known of course as Hakim Zayn, made his AEW debut during last Saturday's AEW Dark tapings at Universal Studios in Orlando, Florida. He lost his first AEW match to JORDYNNE. Now, as noted, and we spoke about here on the channel, Raju announced on January 2nd that he was officially now a free agent. Now, in fairness, at the time, I said I didn't think he was going to go to AEW unless he would appear on AEW Dark. That's exactly what he's doing. So, the only reason I think this might be slightly viable is because, and I'll be totally transparent, I'm not a hypocrite at all. I didn't see really that much of a spot on the AEW roster for ROHIT RAJU, and there might not be going forward. We don't, just because he's appeared at this AEW Dark television taping doesn't mean he's going to get a contract or anything like of that nature. He might just be working a couple of dates. The reason I think that he may have a chance in getting signed to AEW is more of a case of what we're seeing right now is a lot of talents come to the end of their original contracts with AEW. So those talents that signed contracts with AEW in 2019 signed 3-year deals, quite a lot of them. Obviously, they're coming to a close now. I think Joey Janela spoke the other day that his contract's up in May, and I think a lot of contracts are up in April, May, June, July, around that period of time. You know, when AEW was first starting to build their roster in 2019, because you have to remember the first Dynamite, that didn't happen that year until October. The first pay-per-view event, of course, was Double or Nothing, so May. So it's around sort of May time a lot of these contracts are going to be expiring. And AEW's kind of taken the mentality of, we're not going to be WWE and just randomly release people unless, of course, they ask for it or we have some discipline problems with the talent or something of that nature, then we'll let people go. If not, what we're going to do is actually make contracts mean something. So we're going to honor them. If it comes to the end of their contract and you go, you know what, maybe it's time to let this person go, we just won't pick up their deal, but we'll honor the contract that we offer at the time. Because of that, I think we are going to see a bit of a fluctuation in the AEW roster this year. We're going to see a lot of people probably leave the company, probably even some surprising names, because when you're tracking wins and losses, and they do matter, and they do to an extent, I suppose, in AEW, you have to, it comes to a point where if someone's got like a really bad losing record, you can't turn that around, and new people have to come in, and I guess the people that are losing all the time on television eventually have to go. It's a bit like the UFC in the sense that the UFC, if you have a guy under contract that's losing all of his fights, eventually they just won't pick up your contract anymore. They'll say, well, maybe you're not good enough to be at this level. Now, I know this is pro wrestling and the outcome's predetermined, so that analogy kind of doesn't work, but I think that might be the only way that ROHIT RAJU gets into AEW. I'd love to be proved wrong, but I just can't see a scenario where ROHIT's challenging for the TNT Championship on TBS or on TNT. I mean, I might be wrong, but to say I was surprised to see him at Dark would probably be an exaggeration, because we've seen quite a few people leave Impact that have showed up at Dark tapings, but it's one thing, I guess, to be at these Universal Studio tapings, it's another to be on the flagship show on TBS on Wednesday night. So whether or not we'll see ROHIT RAJU going forward, you never know. I mean, we saw Kira Hogan leave AEW to go to Impact, go to AEW from Impact last year, but again, that's slightly different because their women's division is so underdeveloped, and it was at the time. So it's different. It's a bit different with ROHIT RAJU, but we'll see what happens with him going forward. And of course, I'll be watching with bated breath to see his AEW Dark debut. Now, going back to some Impact news, because I said we were going to talk about Impact Wrestling, and there's plenty to talk about when it comes to the world of Impact Wrestling. Now, the Impact World Championship match has been announced for No Surrender. The main event for No Surrender has officially been announced, with the Impact World Championship being on the line. At, of course, Impact Hard to Kill, Moose retained the Impact World Championship by defeating Matt Cardona and W. Morrissey in a triple threat match. Morrissey, who of course once held an alliance with Moose, since then has been angling for a one-on-one match against Moose that Moose promised him but never followed through on. Now, after defeating the Learning Tree in a handicap match during last night's episode of Impact Wrestling on Access TV, Morrissey called out Moose, saying that he's not going to stop coming for him until he gets that title shot. He added that if Moose won't show his face, he will come and find him. This led to Morrissey running into Impact Wrestling Executive Vice President Scott D'Amore backstage, who said that he will be able to get his hands on Moose at No Surrender. As you can see there, the event is scheduled to take place on Saturday, February 19th. So that is the first match that has been announced for the show. And I think it's always been building to this. I mentioned before, when they started doing the alliance between Moose and W. Morrissey, it was always going to lead to an eventual match between the two. Now, we didn't know really at the time if it would be for the Impact World Championship because we didn't really know that situation. For a while, certainly it felt like they were going in that Josh Alexander direction, and because of that, we were going to have Josh Alexander doing his thing, and Moose versus W. Morrissey would just be two big guys facing off in a singles match. Obviously, with the title being on the line, there's more stakes to it. It kind of feels like an old-fashioned pro wrestling main event from, say, like the 90s when size mattered more. You've got two big guys and two really athletic big guys as well. And yeah, I think you have to give so much credit to W. Morrissey because the work he's done since coming in April of last year, he was a guy that, again, his reputation wasn't great because of the stuff that happened with him in the prior few years and because of his personal issues and because of his substance abuse issues. And now, look at him. He's main eventing pay-per-views. He's challenging for a world championship. I would assume he's re-signed with Impact Wrestling. I don't think any official news has come out about that. We know that his contract expired. It was around November time it expired, and then he agreed to work with Impact for the remainder of the year. I'm assuming if this guy's working pay-per-view main events in January and now pay-per-view main events in February, he must have re-signed. We know that there was negotiations going on, and he requested a significant pay rise and a significant amount of money. But I think Impact Wrestling knows what they have. I mentioned this several times when it comes to W. Morrissey as well, that people forget where he was in WWE because of obviously the stuff that happened to him afterwards and the way he left the company. People assume that he's not talented or he hasn't got it, shall we say. But this is a guy that, once he was called up to the main roster with Enzo, he teamed with him for 18 months, and then they split him off because they knew this guy was money. On top of that, when Daniel Bryan returned from retirement or came out, was cleared right after WrestleMania in 2018, who was the first guy that Daniel Bryan feuded with? It was W. Morrissey. It was Big Cass. The reason why is because they saw absolute money in W. Morrissey. And if it wasn't for those, personal issues and the backstage behavior and the way he was conducting himself at the time, he would still be with WWE because he ticks every box for them. So I think Impact realizes, and they realized this when they signed him last year, when he came in April, it was a case of, if we're getting a healthy W. Morrissey that's got all of that baggage put in the past, we've got ourselves a major player here, and that's proving to be the case. So I'm looking forward to the main event. I think Moose will retain because I don't see him dropping the championship so soon after winning it. I guess that was October, so anything's possible. I mean, on the flip side, it could be W. Morrissey's final night with the company, right? Stay till February, you put over the world champion, then you leave. So we'll wait and see what happens with that one, but I'm certainly interested, and I think Impact have done a good job in building to this title match. Speaking of title matches, Matt Cardona is just looking for a championship in Impact Wrestling because the longtime internet champion now has his eyes on digital media gold. Now, on the January 20th episode of Before the Impact, Jordynne Grace faced and defeated Lady Frost, retaining her Impact Digital Media Championship. But after the match, Matt Cardona came to the ring, approached Grace, and pointed at the title. He was then interviewed by Gia Miller and said that even though he failed to capture the Impact World Championship from Moose, there are other world titles to be won, specifically that of the World Wide Web. He then clarified that he is indeed issuing a challenge to Jordynne Grace. Of course, Grace became the first ever Impact Digital Media Champion at Bound for Glory when she won a six-way match that included the likes of Chelsea Green, Skylar, Madison Rayne, Crazy Steve, and Fala Bar. I think this makes a lot of sense. I mean, talk about the perfect person to be the Digital Media Champion, Matt Cardona. I think Matt Cardona, obviously the match does happen, and I think Matt Cardona wins the championship. When it's going to happen, don't know. Probably no surrender, one would think. But it makes a lot of sense to me, and I think Matt Cardona wins. I've mentioned before that I want to see more of the Matt Cardona outside of Impact come into it. I think we're starting to see that a little bit more. Obviously, the work he's doing in GCW is just unbelievable. It really is. I mean, didn't he officially become the ECW television champion the other day, right? I think on the actual lineage, it actually counts, even though I'm not sure how legally they pulled that off. But it makes a ton of sense that the internet champion would become the digital media champion. I wouldn't be surprised if they go down a route of, okay, it's digital media championship versus internet championship, and then they kind of merge that together. Because we saw, was it Effie from GCW win the internet championship at one point, and then Cardona won it back. So maybe they'll go title for title. Maybe they'll make the match even bigger than that. So I think it's a no-brainer. If there's anyone that should be the digital media champion, it's Matt Cardona. So I'm excited to see that, and I know people have their thing about intergender wrestling. It's not a big deal for me. It's pro wrestling at the end of the day. I don't know about you, but I'm very excited about Mickie James. Of course, Mickie James, we know, is going to be in the Women's Royal Rumble match next weekend, and it's a very exciting time, and it's a very interesting time because, of course, WWE historically doesn't play well with others. So to have a wrestler signed to another company, to be actually openly saying she's the Impact Knockouts champion and is going to be at the Royal Rumble is a big deal. And Mickie James has confirmed that she intends to wear the Knockouts championship at the Royal Rumble. I spoke about this before, that I felt that the company itself, Impact Wrestling, would be pushing a lot to be like, okay, Mickie, when you go to the Rumble, wear your title. And on top of that, let's see if we can get your actual hardcore country music played. And I think they will. I really do. And Mickie James has kind of confirmed that. Mickie James recently spoke with Busted Open Radio. The former WWE superstar, as I mentioned, has been confirmed for the upcoming Royal Rumble, which caused a surprise. However, she has made it clear she plans to walk to the ring with the title itself. She said, quote, I think it's pretty important, and I feel like the fact that Pat McAfee has also already mentioned it on television and referred to me as the Knockouts champion, that was really powerful. So I intend to walk out with the championship. I feel like that's representing the company I work for now and that I am the champion for. Now, her upcoming return to WWE was a shock due to the fact she was released last year, plus obviously everything that happened afterwards, Trashgate, etc. This is what she had to say about it, which is quite interesting. She said, quote, I feel like it was important for me to not have that instant be the thing. I did some incredible work there at WWE, and for whatever reason, that's the thing. That door is never really closed, and I just hated having the bad blood. I didn't want the asterisk. I had all these cool matches and cool moments, but it was overshadowed by this one thing. That sucked, and I'm glad that's not going to happen anymore, and it sucked. But it wasn't like I was the only person it happened to, and I think at the end of the day, my dream was to have been there and do all of these monumental things I was able to do there. I don't just want to be known for that other thing. So this is something cool and different. So if it's the last thing, it's pretty cool, So I agree with her in that sense that whilst it was surprising, I can understand from her perspective, her thinking of, I don't want that to be maybe my lasting legacy when it comes to WWE, because she's a future Hall of Famer. She's a legend. She's an icon in women's wrestling and just pro wrestling in general. And at least, as she mentions, if that is her last appearance inside of a WWE ring, it's going to be, my last appearance inside of a WWE ring was at the Royal Rumble in a stadium full of people. I was wearing a championship from another company. I was breaking down barriers, and that's pretty cool. Instead of, the last time I was with WWE, I got fired and they sent me my belongings in a trash bag. There's a difference. There's certainly a difference there. So I'm glad that she's wants to close this chapter properly, and I said from an Impact perspective, it's incredibly exciting. Really, it is, isn't it? And it makes total sense that Mickie James would want to come out with a championship. Because, certainly Impact would be like that. It's one thing, as I mentioned, it's one thing to have them sort of casually mention it on SmackDown. And the Impact Knockouts World Champion's going to be in the Royal Rumble. That's one thing. That created buzz. But just think of the extra buzz of when she actually appears inside the stadium, when there's going to be so many people watching it around the world, on Peacock or however they watch it. That's going to be a big deal. And if she comes out and it says Impact Knockouts Champion, she cut the belt and it's hardcore country, that's huge for Impact Wrestling. It's massive. And that's something that we've never seen that. We have never seen that when it comes to WWE and Impact Wrestling. We've seen it with other companies, but we've never seen an Impact champion appear at a WWE event on television inside the ring. That's big stuff. We've had a little bit of crossover in the past. Ric Flair, Hall of Fame. He was technically under contract to Impact. Christian Cage went to WWE, but that wasn't this. This is different, and it's exciting. So I'm fascinated as to how this one plays out. I'm fascinated and excited to see her come back in the Royal Rumble, wearing the Impact Knockouts Championship. It's a big deal, and it's a pretty groundbreaking moment for Impact Wrestling. It is. So I'm very excited, and I'm glad that Mickie James feels like she's writing this chapter in the best way possible. Obviously, recently we've seen a new color commentator, new play-by-play commentator, rather, in the form of Tom Phillips come into the company. We have a bit of an update when it comes to Matt Striker and Scott D'Amore actually thanking Matt Striker for his work with the company. Now, Impact Wrestling Executive Vice President Scott D'Amore took to social media recently to thank Matt Striker for his work with Impact Wrestling. This is what D'Amore wrote. Now that Impact Wrestling Hard to Kill and the prior week's Impact Wrestling episode are done, I'd like to take a moment to thank Matt Striker for his time with us. I asked Matt to join us at the beginning of the pandemic. It's always great to work with a friend of 20 plus years. #thank you. I mentioned previously, Striker announced on January 5th that he was finished with the company after only a year. Striker tweeted, quote, "I'm disappointed that my time with Impact Wrestling is done. I really enjoyed that locker room. Thanks for allowing me to tell your story. Thanks, everyone. Stay safe." As I mentioned, former WWE announcer Tom Hannifan was hired as the new play-by-play announcer. I mentioned before, I didn't think it was a binary choice. I really didn't when it came to Matt Striker or Tom Hannifan. I'm a huge Tom Hannifan fan, it must be said. I really am. I think he's right up there as one of the best play-by-play guys out there. And I was shocked when WWE let him go because I thought he was so great. And I still do think he's great. He's got a great voice. I think he tells great stories, great emotion. I think he's very, very good. So obviously, it's a huge signing and a huge pickup for Impact Wrestling, no doubt about it. But I feel like you didn't need to get rid of Matt Striker to facilitate Tom Hannifan coming in. I felt personally, I would have loved, and this isn't a slight to D'Lo Brown or anything like that, because I think D'Lo's fine as a color commentator, but I just feel like Tom Hannifan and Matt Striker as a commentary duo, that's money. That absolutely 100% could be money right there. And I guess it's slightly disappointing that we didn't get to see that. I'm not much of a 3-person booth either. I think the 2-person booth is fine. So I feel like it is a missed opportunity for Impact. And as Scott D'Amore says, I thought Matt Striker did a great job. I was surprised how well he did, actually. I'm a big Matt Striker fan of his commentary work. He'd done play-by-play stuff before this, obviously for AAA and for Lucha Underground. He'd done good play-by-play stuff, but I always think he did his best work as a color commentator, but we didn't see that in Impact, and we didn't need to. And I felt that, again, he did a really good job. I just think that it was a missed opportunity because I think, man, Hannifan and Striker, that could have been a real positive announce team. And it's unfortunate we didn't get to see that, but I'm sure he'll come up again in the future, no doubt about it. Finally, I want to touch on Don West. We'd spoken about the former Impact Wrestling color commentator previously when it came to his cancer diagnosis. And former TNA/Impact Wrestling announcer Don West has announced that, unfortunately, his cancer is back and he's undergoing chemotherapy. West recently began having symptoms, and it was discovered that his brain tumors have returned. Now, as we spoke about, it was revealed back in June 2021 that West had been diagnosed with a brain lymphoma and he would be undergoing treatment immediately. West then announced in September that his cancer was in remission following 8 weeks of chemotherapy and 13 radiation treatments. West was looking forward to getting back to his radio job at News Radio 560 KPQ in Washington State, where he hosts the Don West Show from 2 to 5 p.m. each weekday. On behalf of West, WWE Hall of Famer Jeff Jarrett then announced on December 29 that West was hospitalized as he had to fight cancer for a second time. In an update, West took to Twitter recently and provided an update for his fans. He included more details in a GoFundMe update. This is what he had to say, quote, "Unfortunately, my cancer is back and I'm undergoing chemo. Thanks to all that have contributed in the past. If you'd like to donate to the GoFundMe page, it is, quote, join the Don West tag team against lymphoma. God bless." And it's incredibly unfortunate and sad, but I have no doubts and I have complete faith that he's beaten this once. It went into the remission once and he'll absolutely be able to do it again. So thoughts and prayers to Don West, and also if you have anything to donate, if you'd like to donate to his cause, his fight against cancer, you can do that as well. So all the best to Don West. I was a huge, as mentioned before, people used to give a bit of slack to Don West for his work, but I just felt he had such a great passion for the product, and he was different. It was at a time when he was different. We hadn't really heard him before. And I think he just did such a great job at Impact Wrestling. And I think he's actually a little bit underrated. You go back and watch it, that kind of passion he brings to the product, that means something, and it definitely meant something back in the day when it came to TNA wrestling. So all the best to Don West. I hope he recovers safely. But look, guys, as always, it's just one man's opinion. What are your thoughts on all of these Impact Wrestling news videos? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Be sure to smash a like on the like button, and be sure to subscribe, bottom right hand corner. And I'll speak to you again very, very soon. Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.